certificate is issued to that child and the birth certificate does not have the name of the father, as has often been the case, does that child have a right to have their father's name added to their birth certificate? That's the conversation I'm having today. What have the courts said about this? And what is the procedure to actually have this done, if any? Luckily for us, someone actually went to court and they said, I want my father's name on my birth certificate. And they said, I also want to challenge a section of the law that makes it hard or almost impossible for me to have my father's name on the birth certificate. So what happens? Wazazi wakikosana, father and mother are not in talking terms, or there was no commitment, or there was no relationship, or there was no marriage, but now a child has come. What is the right of that child? When we come back, we're going to be talking about this. But for now, of course, let's get some music, and then we dive deep into the law, Sheria Dive style.
Pawaradio. Tune in and power up.
Mapenzi yalianzishwa na nani? Aniko na uradaro mogijali. Anifafanulie kanuni gani za kujenga penzi bila kisirani? Niketo moko manyoera kanisa. Mokoto yude amuna. Yawani kode bende kurvats giri inshallah. Kendogi ole ni amina. Jango mao nikapata mwingine manika kimaba na manovendo twacheka ndemora era bera moro masilwa angango era kona tangola on yokolo umedla mona unyalo timona ono era
Yes, we're right here on Sheria Dive on Pawaradio, and we're discussing a question that, as a society, of course, we have to grapple with. Now, let me just give you some numbers. In 2023, May, a report was actually released by the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, and the KNBS, their work is to actually gather data on many different things, the state of the economy, how many people are being born, how many people are dying, all that. And this survey, which gives details of birth registration by marital status of the mother, showed that there was an increase in the number of single mothers compared to the married ones from 2018 to 2022. So these are the numbers look like. The proportion of registered births by married women decreased to 85.6% in 2022 from 85.9% in 2021. while the proportion of registered births by single mothers increased slightly to 13.9% in 2022 from 13.5% in 2021, which means 0.4% increase. That the people who are giving birth are saying, I am a single mother. And now, at the point of birth, those of you who've actually given birth or been involved in that process, you know that at that point, you are given what is called a birth notification, because the government requires that every child that is born, they need a birth notification. On that birth notification, you have to indicate the name of the mother and the name of the father. Often, children who are born to single mothers, their father's details are left blank. When that information is received at the registrar by the registrar of births, they then, in the birth certificate that will be issued, indicate the name of the child, the name of the mother. But when it comes to the name of the father, it's left as a blank. Sawa sawa. So far, so good. Now, this has often been a question where people ask, is it right for the child to have a birth certificate where their father does not actually appear? Or does the law provide some protection for these children? Now, in the year 2016, LNW, let's call her LNW for now, just to protect her identity, a single mother of a child born outside marriage, filed a petition on her behalf for her child and also for other children born out of wedlock and on behalf of other affected persons of her class as single mothers. Her claim was that Section 12 of the Births and Deaths Registration Act, there's an act called the Births and Deaths Registration Act, and it governs how births and deaths are recorded in Kenya. She said Section 12 of that act is unconstitutional. Now, this is what that Section 12 says. It says, no person shall be entered in the register as the father of any child except either at the joint request of the father and mother or upon the production to the registrar of such evidence as he may require that the father and mother were married according to law or in accordance with some recognized custom. So what is the law saying here? Section 12 of that law says that for a man's name to be entered into the birth certificate, it has to be done only under two conditions. The first condition is that it has to be a joint request. Both the father and the mother have to come and request for it jointly. Or the second condition is that you must produce evidence that the father and mother were married. Now, of course, most of these laws, we were taking them from the British. And perhaps no one ever thought, what happens then to children who are born and the parents were not married, and it's also not a joint request? It's actually a request that is only being made by the mother. And so, according to LNW, she went to court, and actually her petition was filed in 2014. And she was saying, we need to declare that that section is inconsistent with the law. Okay? Now, the petition basically was saying that the provisions of the Births and Deaths Registration Act were discriminatory because they provided that the only time that the name of the father of a child born outside marriage can be entered in the register of births is upon the joint request or upon proof of marriage. For her, she said, that provision is the beginning of the journey of inequality that a child born out of wedlock has to travel, which means a child that is born out of a marriage relationship, okay, or out of wedlock, from the moment they're born, they begin to experience inequality and they begin to experience discrimination. All right? Because at that point, they cannot say who their father is. Even if their father is known to them, even if their father is known to their mother, they cannot. Now, according to her, she said that she had conceived and gave birth to a child out of wedlock. That child's birth certificate did not bear the name of the father. When the child was born, the father of that child, and now this is LNW's story, the father of that child indicated to her in clear terms that his name should not feature in that child's birth certificate. she complied with his request, and in any case, she was bound by Section 12 of the Births and Deaths Registration Act. Now, according to her, she had come to court because her child lives in the dark. They have an incomplete name and or identity, despite the fact that children are entitled to a name and an identity which helps them to connect with where they come from, who their family members are, and who their relatives and extended family are. According to the mother, this child's family tree has a loose hanging dead branch because she does not know who her father is. As a result, she was troubled at all the times by the thought that her daughter could one day fall in love with her sibling and get married as a result of the fact that she does not know who her father is. She argued as well that a child's father's name should appear in the register of births and in the birth certificates in order to create an avenue through which children born out of wedlock can enjoy their rights. Also, according to her, if and when they would go for hospital visits, a child's medical history cannot be fully known unless the identity of that father is known. So the basis or the background of her petition at the High Court of Kenya was that when a child is born out of wedlock, they are disadvantaged on many fronts. They are disadvantaged on the front of health, marriage, and inheritance because there's an inability or a restriction that is set out in the Act. But in addition, many single mothers also find themselves victims of indirect discrimination on the basis of their status. Now, she claimed and she stated that registration creates the foundation on which you as a person or that child is able to enjoy their rights, is able to be protected, and is able to have their rights promoted and fulfilled. Registration creates the content that comprises the birth register of all the people in any country. And that registration is key to the identity of a person, to distinguish and to protect that person that is born in that country. In addition, she was of the view that, once you've been registered as someone's father, then you have a legal responsibility for that child. You have the duty to safeguard and promote that child's health and development and to provide them with direction and guidance throughout their childhood. She was saying that having the child's father's name on the birth certificate guarantees a child that he or she will be cared for by both parents and assures that child that it shall be officially recognized by the government, creates a bridge to access and enjoyment of many rights and privileges which cannot be enjoyed by a child who does not know who the father is. And so basically what she was coming to court to say is, Section 12, the way it is, it denies my child the right to enjoy dignity because it denies them an identity and a name. That child cannot escape the taunts and the ridicule of society due to the lack of a father's name. And when you put XXX abbreviation as the alleged initials of the father's name, what exactly are you saying about their parentage and about the beginning of this child? Well, the court had to grapple with this question. How do you then go and address that question? Because remember, the court, or rather the law, has already created that restriction and that provision. And perhaps there are many people who are listening to this show today who you still have an XXX where your father's name should be. Is it your human right to actually have your father's details put on that birth certificate? Should we as a country in 2024, for instance, or should we as a country within the new constitution of 2010, should we be a country where XXX is put alongside the name, or is put instead of the name of a father on a birth certificate? Should we actually be encouraging such such a practice in Kenya. What does it do to the genesis and the background of a child? Isn't a birth certificate that has XXX instead of a name, isn't it giving incorrect information? Because that child surely had a father. So who was the father of that child? And so here, the Constitution in 2014 was being tested. Does the law protect the child? Let's get some music. When we come back, what did the government say in response? Because remember, the government was being sued because the registrar of births and deaths is an office in the government. What was their response? And then, what did the court determine? And time allowing, we're going to have a chance to look at a very interesting case where a guy went to court and said, remove my name from this birth certificate. What did the court say? Let's get some music.
Your kind of music, all day, all night, right here on your only station, Pawaradio.
Na kuomba Nerea, usitoe mimba yangu we. Mungu akileta mtoto, analeta sani yake, mlete nitamlea. Usitoe mimba yangu we. Mungu akileta mtoto, analeta sani yake. Huenda kawa Obama, hata wale Amerika. Huenda kawa Lupita, Oscar nazo akashinda. Huenda kawa Wanyama, acheze soka Uingereza. Huenda kawa Kenyatta, mwanzilishi wa taifa. Na kuomba Nerea, usitoe mimba yangu we. Mungu akileta mtoto, analeta sahani yake, lete nitamlea. Usitoe mimba yangu we. Mungu akileta mtoto, analeta sahani yake, nitamlea. Huenda kawa Magai, ailinde mazingira. Huenda kawa Makeba, nyimbo nzuri akatunga. Huenda kawa Nyerere, aongoze Tanzania. Huenda kawa Mandela, mkombozi wa Afrika. Na kuomba Nerea, usitoe mimba yangu we. Mungu akileta mtoto, analeta sahani yake, lete nitamlea. Usitoe mimba yangu we. Mungu akileta mtoto, analeta sahani yake.
Yes. Nerea. Nakuomba Nerea. I don't want to get into the politics of that song. I know, especially Shivazations. Hawataki kusikia nimeongea story hiyo ngoma. So I'm just gonna let that be. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about a case here where a mother, LWN, went to court and said, when I got pregnant and I had this child, The father of that child told me very clearly, I do not want my name to appear on that birth certificate as the father of that child. And she agreed with him and never gave his name. But also she says, the Births and Deaths Registration Act makes it mandatory that the only way the father's name can appear on the birth certificate of a child is, number one, if both the father and the mother make the application, or number two, if I can show proof that I was married to the father. And now she brings the question to court. What is the problem with that for a child? A child who has XXX on their birth certificate where their father's name should be, how does that affect their identity? Remember, the Constitution is very clear that every child has a right to a name and to an identity. Is such a child born already into a world that discriminates against them? And for her, she was saying, my daughter is 4 years old. The father's name is not on the birth certificate. What if she goes and marries her sibling? But what about the ridicule she's facing in society? When people ask her, who's your father? The birth certificate is here. It says XXX. But the reality is that there is no mother without father. So how then do you deal with this question? Those were the questions she brought to the court. Now, the government, this was the response of the government. Of course, the government opposed this application because remember, what she wants is for the court to say, Section 12 of the Births and Deaths Registration Act is unconstitutional. The government comes and says that the act provided the modalities of capturing the particulars of the child's birth, including information regarding the parents. Now, according to the government, it is a duty of the child's parents or occupier of the house in which a child is born to give notice of the birth of the child. The information required include the particulars of the child as well as those of its mother and father where applicable. According to them, where a mother does not declare the particulars of the child's father at birth because they are not married and she would like the father's name to appear in the register, the registrar invokes the provisions of Section 12 where the father is required to give consent. So what the government is saying here is simple. Yes, you may not have proof you are married. However, if you want to have this guy's name included, provide his details, and then we are going to require his consent before we can add his name. Where the notification register is surrendered to the registrar without the father's name, then the registrar has no other way of ascertaining the authenticity of a declaration being made except by the consent of the father. According to him, this is there, and these are his words, it is meant to protect unscrupulous mothers from vindicating any man of their choice for personal reasons. And for them, they say, we need to actually look at this act as a whole. It's an argument that is being made. If we open this, what stops someone from coming to say the father of my child is Uhuru Kenyatta? You know, that's basically what the government is saying. The father must be given an opportunity to say, yes, it is my child, or to say, no, it is not my child. What stops someone from saying Raila Odinga is the father of my child? That was a question that the court now had to answer. How do you then balance? Because remember, when it comes to questions of human rights, there's always a balancing act that must be played. On one hand, the child wants to know their identity. On the other hand, there is a risk. As the government is saying, there's a risk, or there could be room. There could be room for someone to actually bring in other factors or to lie to the registrar and instead give a name that is incorrect. Now, the government also, the registrar argued that the mere fact of having a father's name on a certificate does not guarantee that a child will enjoy the rights that the petitioner was saying have been infringed. In any event, according to them, the section only comes into play where an application to include the name of the father is made long after the birth of the child. There is nothing that prevents a mother from inserting the name of the father of a child, whether or not they are married to each other in the register, except the father must consent. So, is there discrimination when we differentiate between children born in marriage and those born out of wedlock? Is there discrimination? By virtue of having that XXX, is there discrimination? Of course, the reality of our society is that children born out of wedlock suffer ridicule and stigmatization in school and in social platforms whenever the questions of the name and identity of the father arises. Those who are supporting this petition are saying, to deny such a child the opportunity of ever knowing their father is dehumanizing treatment and is undignified because it terminates any connection of the child to the father and is a contravention of Section 28 of the Constitution. So, there is a term that used to be used, I don't know whether it's still used, illegitimate children. Who are illegitimate children? These are children who you would say have been born out of wedlock. All right? These are children who were not born within the confines of a marriage relationship. So, how does a court then approach this conversation and how does it approach this case? The court first began by noting that all laws in Kenya must conform to the Constitution of Kenya, even the laws that were there before. Interestingly, the Births and Deaths Registration Act was first enacted in Kenya in 1928. The last amendment to the Act had been done in 1990. The Act, therefore, predated the 2010 Constitution by 8 decades, 80 years. There was 80 years between when the Act was first, when the Act first commenced, when the law was first created, and when the new Constitution came into place in 2010. Remember, we're dealing with a matter that was being filed in 2014. So, being mindful of that period, how then does the court go ahead to deal with that question of the rights and fundamental freedoms? The court first began by noting that the government was actually admitting that there are different treatments with respect to registration of birth and the entry of particulars of the father to children born outside marriage as against those born within the marriage. The effect of Section 12, the court said, is that if a father of a child born outside marriage is not willing to have his name entered in the register as a biological father, then his name will never be entered in the register. This is because, since the mother and father are not married to each other, there will never be proof of any marriage between them that would satisfy the registrar. Now, can that be allowed in a country where Section 27 of the Constitution states that every person is equal before the law and has the right to equal protection and equal benefit of the law? Article 53, every child has a right to a name and a nationality from birth. The court is bound to always ensure that a child's best interests are of paramount importance in every matter concerning the child. The court began by noting that there should be no legislation that affords different treatment to children on account of their birth. Where the father's name should be is a row of XXX, yet no child is actually born without a father. Is that acceptable? Is that something we should accept? Now, the court asked this question: what is the importance of a name to a child? And what is a mischief to be prevented by treating children regardless of their status at birth equally? The court found that the petitioner was drawing a word picture of the treatment that children born outside marriage who do not know their father's identity or bear their names are subjected to. She spoke about the taunts they receive in school, the question about their fathers in the classrooms, the indignity they experience as a result of the XXXs in their birth certificate. And ladies and gentlemen, This is something that many, many people in this country have. Your birth certificate as XXX. Did you ever realize the indignity you are facing? Did you ever face discrimination as a result of that? Please use our live chat feature just to share your story with us, and I'll be able to highlight it as we continue with this show. And also, you can reach out on the socials at Pawaradio, and we'll just be looking out to see any of the comments that are coming on that matter. The court found that a person's genetic makeup can only be established if there is information with respect to both parents, which will not happen if the identity of the father is missing from a child's birth records. Further, a child is entitled to parental care and protection from both parents, whether they were married to each other or not. The question of inheritance does turn on identity and recognition of children by both their mothers and fathers. Therefore, in the eyes of the court, a provision in the law that denies a child such recognition must derogate from the entitlement of the child to inherit. It affects even your inheritance. But what about the question of unscrupulous women who come and put your name there? You are never with them. And they come and say, this is a person. Weka hiyo jina yake hapo. In the eyes of the court, the constitutional aspiration far outstrips in importance the need to keep official records or the desire to protect men from unscrupulous women. The court found that there are less restrictive means of achieving this purpose. Insofar as this act required that the name of the father of a child born outside marriage shall be entered in the register only with the consent of the father, it was unconstitutional. Further, the court was of the view that if it imposes an unfair burden on women, the mothers of children born outside marriage, and is to the extent discriminatory on the basis of sex. Where the father of a child born outside marriage refuses to contribute to the bringing of this child, the mother is compelled to seek the court's assistance in the form of a maintenance order. With legislation that provides for inclusion of the particulars of the fathers, it is possible for men to take up responsibilities with respect to children that have been sired outside of marriage. And the court said to treat these children differently, to treat them differently, is to violate their rights under the Constitution. And the court even looked at this example where what happens when the father completely refuses? How then does a person deal with that case or with that matter? The idea that we are protecting men from unscrupulous women was, in the view of the court, it was premised on a negative, discriminatory stereotyping of women as dishonest people who will latch onto a man for child support with no basis. In any case, remember, the law itself provides a safeguard for this, that where wrongful information is given for purposes of registration, then that is an offense. An offense that carries a fine and it also carries a prison term. But also, there is DNA testing. A father who can come and say, hey, this is not my child, they'll go for DNA, and the DNA will prove that's not your child, and the birth certificate then does not matter. Even if it says that's your child, the DNA will be clear that this is not your child. The petition was allowed, and the court found that it was merited. Which means that today, when the mother gives birth in the hospital and they are asked for the particulars, you can actually indicate the name of the father. Whether you are married or not, you indicate the name and that name will appear. If you know your father and his name does not appear on your birth certificate, you can actually make an application through the eCitizen platform for that name to be included, and you provide their details so that they're included as the father of that child or as your father. No child should have an XXX where their father is known. Of course, we have the rare cases of children that are, born as a result of sexual abuse, and it could be harder at that point really to determine. But every child should have their father's name on their birth certificate. That is what the Court of the Republic of Kenya has said. Every single child has the right to know their father and to have that name on the birth certificate. And for men, if you are afraid that someone is going to say, Uhuru Kenyatta is the father of my child, the court said we could always do a DNA test. And the DNA test will be very clear and it will show who the father of that child is. Tuko pamoja? Let's take a music break, and then when we come back, there's a very interesting case about a gentleman who went to court and told the court, remove my name. Coming up.
From sunrise to sunset, all day and night. Pawaradio.
Toma, ana kere, saya goro, sirikare.
Yeah, you just know. I have to tell you guys. It's Bena in studio today, so that's why he's decided to be on theme. So yeah, Bena is here. So just he's one you have to thank for all the music, as we are keeping it watoto. Leo ni siku ya watoto. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you a question. What happens if you have what happens if you have a couple that agree to have a man put on the birth certificate as their father, and then someone changes their mind? I'm looking at the comments on our YouTube. Rachel Mando says, hello, yes, a child born to unmarried parents has the right to the father's name, correct? Are we discussing? Yes, that's the case we're discussing. Rachel, thank you for joining us, and share that link. Make sure that this is going out to as many people as possible. Now, we have a very interesting case. A gentleman by the name of JKN went to court and he was seeking the following orders. And hizo initials zinakaa kama zangu manze. I just need to confirm it is not my case. This is not me. But anyway, JKN went to court. And he went to court and said, the court needs to direct the registrar of births and deaths to strike out my name from the birth certificate of DG. DG was a child. And that the child be issued with another birth certificate which does not bear the names of JKN. Sawa? Now, what is the background? JKN got married to MWK, okay, on 8th of August, 2009, in a church in Nairobi. So it was a proper church wedding. They then had a child, a daughter, who was born on 8th March 2010. However, his wife MWK had come into the marriage with another daughter, DG. And he claims that child was not fathered by me. Okay? He says the father of DG is one guy called DN, and he is known to the child and has been providing for the upkeep of the child as well as communicating with her regularly. So he says, you need to remove my name from the birth certificate because it was illegally and deceitfully entered into the record by the child's mother. Now, do you remember that thing that the government was saying? Some women can come here and give us false information. What happens to the men? Almost 16, how many years later? Almost 20 years later. Oh, sorry, how many? 10. Almost 10 years later, a case like that was here in court. So, JKN was saying in the original birth certificate, there was no entry for details of the father. Later, an application for re-registration was made, supported by an affidavit that was sworn by him and the child's mother. Based on that affidavit, the registrar then amended the birth certificate. So understand what the registrar is saying here. The registrar is saying, in response, I completely oppose this application. Why do you oppose it? For this reason. When the first birth certificate was issued for DG, it did not have this gentleman's name as the father of the child. However, an application was made for re-registration, and it was supported by the affidavit of the mother and the guy who has now come to court to say, I am not the father. All right? Okay. This application was made on 17th November 2009. In support of that application was a statutory declaration together with an affidavit, which JKN had signed, confirming that he was a child's father. On the basis of that affidavit, a new birth certificate was issued. So what's happening here? If we believe JKN's story, he is saying, when I married this woman, she came with a child to the relationship. But we had a child together. She then went and used false details to enter my name as a father of her child who I found her with. The wife is saying, no, we applied for re-registration and you even signed an affidavit to that effect. And the affidavit was actually produced in court. The court said, it is therefore a blatant lie and amounts to perjury for the applicant to allege that his name was included unilaterally, wrongfully, and without his consent. The evidence clearly shows that the applicant was involved and gave his consent to the inclusion of his name as a child's father. The court was of the view that it is evident that while the couple were in good terms, the applicant was ready and willing to appear as father in the child's birth certificate. When the relationship turned sour, he goes back to the registrar seeking to have his name removed. The registrar's office cannot be used and abused in this manner. The records maintained in that office are official records which are relied upon by the public. Those records ought not to be manipulated based on the whims of individuals depending on the current state of their marital union. As stated, this is a matter which concerns a child. The child is entitled to know with certainty who her biological father is. And so, the court said, I am in agreement that given the history of this matter, they need to tread carefully. And this is with regards to the registrar. The registrar needs to tread carefully. Who is to say that some years down the line, if the couple reconciles, the applicant will not make a trip back to the registrar's office seeking to be reinstated as a child's father? The court found that the applicant, Mr. JKN, had a duty to prove that he was not the child's father, as he now alleges. He claimed that DN was a child's father. There is no proof that was provided that DN was a child's biological father. The child's mother also did not say any affidavit to confirm this allegation. So, the court said, Mr. JKN, you have two options. Number one, in order to have your name removed from the birth certificate, submit to the registrar's office a DNA test proving that you are not the child's biological father. Number two, apply for a registration and include affidavits sworn by the child's mother and the biological father you claim to support the removal of his name from the child's birth certificate. The application, therefore, was dismissed. This is an example. Those who get into marriage and you decide to take these children up as your own and you want your name to be added on the birth certificate, you cannot just run to court and say, remove it, tumekosana. The court will say, no. That's not how this works. The government office is not a place where you can just move in and out. You're exchanging information with this and you're putting this other information. That cannot work. If you want to put your name, then you have to know what you're doing and you have to stand by that. But also, if you feel you are not the father and your name should be removed, then provide evidence that you're not the father. DNA is a perfect form of evidence to be presented for that. Or number two, have that woman and the other man prepare affidavits to say that indeed we are the parents of that child, not this person. Ladies and gentlemen, every child has a right to have their father's name on the birth certificate. XXX is a sign of discrimination and should never ever be allowed in this country again. That's it from us. Sheria Dive, it's been fantastic to have you with us. Thank you for everyone who's been able to share their thoughts and to give their feedback. Of course, this show will be available online, so you can just listen to this later on. If you'd like to share this with someone who needs to hear it, why don't you just hit that share button. And of course, we continue to grow together as we learn together about the laws of the Republic of Kenya. Have a lovely week. See you here on Saturday between 1 and 3 p.m. for Sheria Dive. We also have a Saturday show. Have a lovely week and take care of yourselves.
Pawaradio. Tune in and power up.
Tunapita kama moshi na kabla tuzame mchangani, kuna kushinda na kufeli. Inabidi ujijue tofauti ya mwalimu na mwanafunzi. from afar, and it's so beautiful. No, they can't touch the fire, and you know it's not in vain. Steady tripping through the pain. Oh, steady rocking on the midnight train. Steady rocking on the midnight train. Oh Lord, steady rocking on the midnight train. Steady rocking on the midnight train. On the midnight Zion. Siku zazidi badilika, mengi yazidi kunipita jama. Oh no, maji yalipozidi unga, hawakudhani tutafika. It's unbelievable that we made it this far. Undeniable to see the promised land from afar.